We're here in Athens, Greece, at a place we hear about in Acts chapter 17. But before I read that passage, I just want to briefly say a word about idols. We know in the Ten Commandments that God prohibits his people from making an idol out of anything that's in heaven or on earth or under the earth, and how we're expressly prohibited to worship them because idols take our passion, our emotion, our relationship away from God, who is the ultimate creator of everything. And here in Athens, Greece, when Paul came in the first century, he addressed issues about idol worship as well as food offered to idols. And one such incident arose when he was here in Athens, and we hear about it in Acts chapter 17, verses 16 to 34, that I'm going to share with you. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was deeply distressed to see that the city was full of idols. So he argued in the synagogue with the Jews and the devout persons, and also in the marketplace every day with those who happened to be there. And that marketplace was called the Agora, which is just down the hill from where we're standing. He argued there with some Epicurean and Stoic philosophers who debated with him. Some said, "What does this babbler want to say?" Others said, "He seems to be a proclaimer of foreign divinities." So they took him and brought him to the Areopagus, which is exactly where we're standing this morning. And they asked him, "May we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting? It sounds rather strange to us, so we would like to know what it means." Now all the Athenians and the foreigners living there would spend their time in nothing but telling or hearing something new. Then Paul stood in front of the Areopagus, probably at the bottom of this large rock that I'm standing on this morning, and said, "Athenians, I see how extremely religious you are in every way. For as I went through the city and looked carefully at the objects of your worship, I found among them an altar with the inscription, 'To an unknown God.'" And again, that inscription was probably found as Paul walked up what's called the Pan-Athenic way that came through the Agora to the Areopagus and up to the Acropolis behind me. So Paul continued, "What therefore you worship as unknown, this I proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it, he who is the Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in shrines made by human hands." Think how dramatic a statement that was for Paul to make in the face of the amazing construction and buildings that were here in the first century. Nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all mortals life and breath and all things. From one ancestor he made all nations to inhabit the whole earth, and he allotted the times of their existence and the boundaries of the places where they would live, so that they would search for God and perhaps grope for him and find him, though indeed he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as even some of your own poets have said. For we too are his offering. Since we are God's offspring, we ought not to think that the deity is like gold or silver or stone, an image formed by the art and imagination of mortals. While God has overlooked the times of human ignorance, now he commands all people everywhere to repent, because he has fixed a day on which he will have the world judged in righteousness by a man whom he has appointed. And of this he has given assurance to all by raising him from the dead. Now when they heard of the resurrection of the dead, some mocked, but others said, "We will hear you again about this." So Paul went out from their midst, but some men joined him and believed. Among them also were Dionysius the Areopagite, and a woman named Damaris, and others with them. So here we are in the face of what was one of truly the greatest cities of the ancient world, with construction that still staggers the imagination 2,000 years later. But those buildings don't serve the purpose they once did, and they are ruins now. They're not part of a vital faith. And yet 2,000 years later, we can say with the letter of the Hebrews that Jesus is the reflection of God's glory, the exact imprint of God's very being, and he sustains all things by his powerful word. When he had made purifications for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high. And that is what we continue to believe and what we continue to worship, that through the centuries, emperors and empires come and go and rise and fall, but we worship a living God who made the whole earth and everything in it, and wants to have a relationship with you and me that lasts for all eternity.